Life that just cannot be explained? I don't know if I'd call it supernatural, but it was freaky and I still don't understand. I was in the kitchen cleaning up waiting for my kid's bus. I saw it pull up and saw him get off. He didn't come in, but he'd started playing around with hiding under the window to jump out at me and say boo, so I thought that's what he was doing. But I walked out and he wasn't there. I called his name and looked around the house thinking he was hiding from me, but I couldn't find him. I circled the house calling for him, and the parent panic set in. It probably only lasted 90 seconds, but it felt a lot longer. Then his bus pulled up and he got off. We were about 13, my best friend and I. She lived in the second story of an apartment building with her mom at the time. After playing indoors, we decided to go outside. As soon as we stepped outside, her in front of me, I said, "Oh, it's so cold," and I let the door slightly ajar to grab my coat off the couch. Then turning around, we ran back outside together. I stopped at the door to put on my coat, but she kept running to the end of the balcony where the stairs were that led to an empty parking lot. Trying to be sneaky and scare her, I snuck up behind her as she quietly looked over the railing. When I got about 3 feet away from her, she quickly turned around, smiled, and darted around the corner down the stairs. I laughed and chased after her, only I thought it was odd how quickly she got down the stairs and found a place to hide. The stairs led to an empty parking lot. She was nowhere to be found. Confused, I circled back up to the stairs on the opposite end of the lot. These stairs were the only other way up to the second floor, and an apartment complex length down the way. As I made my way across, up, and back to her apartment without seeing her, I opened her apartment door in at the same time she was walking back out. Immediately I was thinking, WTF, how? I said, "How did you get back inside so fast?" She said, "What do you mean? I went in right behind you, to get my coat too." She went on to explain that she agreed when I said it was cold and went back in with me to grab a coat from her room. I was very young, probably 7 to 8 years old. My mother had gone to the store and left me alone. This is early 80s in small town Mississippi, y'all. It was a different time. It had to be a Saturday morning because I was watching cartoons and I heard a knock on our front door. We didn't have a window or a peephole, and it's small town BFE nowhere Mississippi, so I opened the door and there's an elderly man standing there, bleeding from the head. He was wearing these thick gold Coke bottle glasses, a bright red short-sleeved shirt with a pocket protector, blue jeans, and a belt buckle that had "Eddie" engraved on it in big letters. He said he was in a car accident down the road and if I could please call the police and fire department, since his wife was trapped in the car. I told him to come and sit down on our couch. He did, and I shut the door. I went into the kitchen and called our local police department and told them about the accident. When they asked where the accident happened, I realized I didn't know, so I yelled out to the man, "What road did this happen on?" And I got no answer. I told the police to hold on, walked into the living room, and the man was gone, like a fart in the wind. I didn't hear our squeaky ass door open, so I knew he didn't leave, and there was an imprint on the couch from where he had been sitting. I looked in my bathroom to see if maybe he had gone in there to wash the blood off his head, and he wasn't there. I looked in my bedroom and my mom's bedroom, nothing. When I came back to the phone, I told the police operator that he was gone and I didn't know he had left. I gave them my address and the police and fire department came to my house. I told them about what had happened, what the man had been wearing, everything. The police searched the area and found nothing. They talked to my neighbors who said they didn't hear anything and didn't see anyone matching the man's description. By this time my mom got back home, and I got in trouble for making a false police call. Months later, when I got off the school bus one afternoon, there were police cars everywhere at my house. A detective was waiting inside with my mom and said he wanted to ask me some questions about the phone call I made about the man asking for help a few months previously. When I told him the story again, and gave him the man's description, he just sat there staring at me open-mouthed. He thanked me for my time, told me I wasn't in trouble, and they gave me a police officer teddy bear. They talked to my mom for a bit and left. After they had been gone a few minutes, my mom called me back into the dining room and sat me down at the table and told me that the police had found a car that had driven off the road less than a mile from our house and had found 2 bodies inside. One was thought to be male and the other female. The car was completely destroyed and upside down, about 60 yards off the road in a very rural and heavily wooded area, which is why it took them so long to find them. The body thought to be male was wearing the exact same clothes I had described. Both of them were pinned inside the car upside down, and both were still wearing their seatbelts. My family and friends treated me really weird for a long time. Just wish I could show people firsthand how bizarre it really was. There's this place in my hometown called Old Town, which is an area they had to evacuate because a mine was there and it made the area unsafe due to sinkholes and whatnot. I was in a class in middle school called Environmental Adventures where you did outdoor stuff, and we went to Old Town to do some geocaching. While the class was walking, we saw an old lady on a rocking chair on a concrete foundation where a house used to be. She was dressed like an old-timey old lady like Muriel from Courage the Cowardly Dog. She was rocking back and forth, talking to herself while she stared into the woods, not looking at us once. We found the geocache a little down the road, turned around, and her and the rocking chair disappeared. There was no way that she could have got away that fast toting a rocking chair without us seeing her. We were only at the geocache for like 5 minutes. Confused everybody. Weirdest shit ever. My dad killed my mom when I was 10. I'm now mid-30s. 2 years ago I had lost my wedding ring. We looked everywhere. I even played back the security camera at work to see if I was wearing it when I left. I gave up finding it and was very upset. One night I had a dream my mom woke me up and said, "I know you've been looking for this. I love you. It'll be out here." In the morning I was getting ready for work as usual, sat down on the couch. Right in front of me on the ottoman was my ring. I went to bed after my wife and she woke up after me. I used that ottoman the night before and there's no way the ring could have been there. Again, I checked our camera. We had been robbed once, so we kept a camera towards the front door. It could see our couch, and the ottoman had no ring when I went to bed. I still cry every now and then remembering it. My cousin had struggled with depression his whole life, and a few years ago things came to a head. He was 100% convinced the only cure to his depression was suicide. That death was the only thing that would make him truly happy. We were close, so it hit pretty hard. After the funeral, my aunt told us that she had saw a helium-filled smiley face balloon kind of float in front of her, then stop, and it just kinda sat there for a minute. Then it flew up and away, out of sight, on its own. When she told us this we kind of just brushed it off as a coincidence, but it kept happening to her over the next couple weeks. We thought she was just recognizing patterns, until I was at a music festival a few months later and the exact same type of balloon, same color and everything, flowed through my campsite, and did the same thing where it stopped on its own, stared at me, then kind of bobbed and flew up and away. I'm not really a believer in ghosts and the like, but I'm convinced in some shape or form that was my cousin telling us that he was finally happy. Early into my now wife and I's relationship I had a dream about her in childbirth. Very vivid, and long. Like I spent days in the hospital with her and everything was in a strange twilight. When it came time to deliver, things went very wrong and she and baby ended up passing away. I woke up quite shook naturally but brushed it off. I am a nurse and have had to deal with traumatic OB situations before, and I chalked it up to me dealing with that stress through a dream. 6 years later and my wife is pregnant. I have forgotten the dream by now. I get a call late into the 3rd trimester while I am on shift. Wife is going to the ER for a bad BP. I get off my shift and go to meet her. As soon as I step into the room I remember my dream. It's the same damn room. Which is extra spooky because the hospital we were at wasn't even built when I had the dream. This is last year, right when lockdown started. My wife has admitted they want to wait a week to deliver if possible. She will be kept in a twilight state until that time. So it's me in this room, eerily isolated as the world around us is frozen and my wife is incoherent mere feet away. Lingering for days in this room I brushed off my dream, trying to manage my anxiety and stress. Come showtime my wife gets ready to begin pushing and it's exactly the same scenario as my dream. Things start going poorly, but the doctor thinks delivery is still possible. But at this point I finally freak out into full panic, and demand a C-section for my wife. The doctor I can tell wants to argue, but I think my outburst made her step back and reassess the situation and she made the call for emergency C-section. Took 10 minutes for me to get taken back and as I'm in the ER I see my baby come out lifeless. They do everything they can and manage to resuscitate her. In the meantime my wife is doing poorly and they are scrambling to control her bleeding. I follow the baby out knowing there's really nothing I can do. Baby gets life flighted to another hospital, but before we go I see my wife stable and headed to the ICU. Both my wife and baby are critical but alive. Today they are both thriving and my baby is 16 months and just a tornado of energy. I don't know that they would be alive if not for that dream and it causing me to freak out and demand a change in plan. Many years ago, my parents had separated and my father was planning on taking a trip across the country to California. He was pretty excited about it. I talked to him the day before he's leaving, wish him well and tell him I'll talk to him after he gets to California. The day of his trip, he calls me and tells me he decided last minute not to go. Refuses to really get into why. Just says he changed his mind. Seemed really odd for something that he had been planning for a couple months. That night I'm sitting at my girlfriend's house and we're watching the news, and they report that US Air Flight 1493, the flight my dad was supposed to be on, collided with another aircraft while landing in Los Angeles. About 25% of the people on the flight were killed. Hard to know how my dad would have made out, because it really depended on where you were sitting, front versus back of the plane. It was several months before he finally told me that night before he was supposed to leave, he had an extremely vivid dream that he died in a fiery plane crash. So vivid that it scared him out of flying that day. My dad is a Marine Corps Vietnam veteran who saw combat. I can only imagine how vivid the dream must have been, to scare him out of getting on that plane that morning. When I was in middle school, my grandparents were in charge of the local theater group and we're doing this musical show where people dressed up as old country stars and sang some songs. My grandma was the director and my grandpa was in charge of technical stuff like lights and sound. Well, this particular showing was on Elvis Presley's birthday and they had a little bit at the end where they sang Happy Birthday in all their costumes. Well, the show ends and they're all doing curtain call and I'm sitting in the back with my grandpa while he's controlling the lights and sound when all of a sudden Happy Birthday by the Beatles starts playing over the speakers. My grandpa looks confused and starts messing around with the sound machines and pressing buttons and dials, and my grandma runs back yelling at him as that wasn't the song he was supposed to play. He then looks up and goes, "That's not me," and my grandma says, "What do you mean it's not you? Switch it to the right song," and he looks so confused and says, "We don't even have this song on CD for this play. This isn't coming from our music," and my grandma just turns around and leaves. Whole song plays and ends when the curtain closes. No one in the crowd really noticed and it seemed normal but still freaks me out. No clue where the music was coming from, and we inspected the CD that all the music for the play was on that was currently in the computer playing music throughout the entire performance, and sure enough that song was not on it. I still think the ghost of Elvis was there that night. I have an idea of what may have happened, but I cannot definitively say how this happened. My father died in 2000 in my parents' house. I was over one night pretty late after my mother had gone to sleep. I swear I could feel my father's presence, as I was right in the spot where he had died. They believe he had a heart attack while laying on the couch, tried to get off the couch to call for help but fell on the floor and died, though no one else was home when it happened. I was on the couch when this happened. Anyway, I thought to myself, this is stupid. People don't leave essences behind, I'm not feeling anything. So, I say out loud, if this is really you, Dad, knock a box of cereal off the shelf onto the floor. I wanted to pick something I didn't think could happen by accident. I went into the kitchen and watched the shelf with the cereal on it for a few minutes and nothing happened. Since it was almost midnight, I decided to sleep in my old bedroom. I woke up the next morning and went downstairs and a box of cereal was laying on the floor. I say to my mother, "Did you knock that cereal onto the floor?" She said no, it was like that when she woke up. So, what the fuck, man? However, my mother had a cat. I'm guessing the cat did it, but I don't know for sure. If she'd gotten on the shelf, everything would have been knocked around and messy from her. Everything else was in its normal position, just the box of cereal was on the floor. I mean, regardless, it has to have been the cat, right? I grew up in a very rural area. Mostly crop farms everywhere. About a mile from my parents' house, there was this old abandoned farmhouse that all the area kids said was haunted. They would sneak into the house after dark, all the typical stupid kid crap, but I believe there are things in this world better left alone and never went. Years pass, the house fell into disrepair and was eventually torn down, leaving an old weathered barn. Well, I make a little side money selling photos of abandoned places, so I wanted to take a picture of the barn. I parked on the road and was walking up the drive. I made it about 10 feet before I just could not walk any further. My feet wouldn't move forward, my adrenaline spiked and I burst into tears. So I turned back and ran to my car. I didn't feel safe until I got past a nearby creek you have to cross to get there. I let it go, but a few months later we had to drive past the property after having Christmas dinner with my parents and there was a creature standing in the drive. It reminded me of the faun from Pan's Labyrinth, Just super tall with a wide head and horns or antlers, but the eyes were more on the side of the head. Again, adrenaline kicked in and I burst into tears, but I was trying to keep it together because I didn't want to freak out my kids. My husband asked if I was okay. I just said, "You saw that, right?" "Yep." "Was it human?" "Nope." I refused to drive that road ever again. When I was a kid, about 10-12-ish, I was carrying a load of laundry upstairs home alone while mom was out doing errands. We have this weird carpet runner over our hardwood stairs that's only really attached at the top of the flight but otherwise not fitted or secured to each individual stair, so naturally I step on an air bubble of carpet with my vision obscured by the laundry and fall backwards while bear hugging a bunch of blankets. I specifically remember thinking, "Vale, guess I'm about to die," while almost airborne with just my big toe left on the carpet when I felt two hands, one on either side of my shoulder blades, give me a firm shove that launched me back up on the step and diagonally against the stair rail. I assumed mom somehow silently came back early without announcing herself and turned around to thank her while still clinging to the railing, but no one was there. I scurried upstairs to put my things down while calling her name and walked the house afterwards to check if any doors were unlocked or if her car was there. I finally resorted to calling her cell, where she told me she was hitting up a few more stores. It still feels like there's a presence on that stairwell, like someone's watching, but in a protective way rather than sinisterly. I had a dream once about my high school best friend who had moved out of state and started a family. I hadn't seen her or spoken to her in at least 10 years and had never met her child, except seeing pictures/posts on Facebook and commenting on them. In my dream, I was walking down a street at night and out of nowhere her little girl appears next to me and I asked her, "Where is your mama? Why are you by yourself?" I remember her taking me to some bushes near a random house on the street and finding my friend in bad shape, beaten up or something, on the ground, and I remember running to the door of the random house screaming for help and to call the police. This is all I can recall from the dream, but I think there may have been a little more. The next day, I wake up and think to myself, man, that was weird. Maybe I dreamt of her because we had just spoken a little in comments of a Facebook post. I should send her a message. I go on about my day, go to work, get home later that day and sit on my couch and scroll through Facebook. Bam! 1,000 posts, rest in peace, etc., all of them tagged my friend and her daughter. I thought, what in the actual FCK? At that point there was no information as to what had happened, so I thought it must have been a car accident or something. Over the course of the next few weeks to months, more and more information came out and it was not an accident. My friend and her sweet baby had been murdered by some animal. I won't refer to them as a person. This happened about 5 years ago. I still remember the main parts of the dream vividly. I still am a little horrified that I had this dream that night. When it was happening, possibly. I haven't been able to tell anyone else about it either because just thinking about it gives me chills. Working as night security for a small office at a sanitation plant. Building was a single entrance and you had to check in at the security station to get in or out. A worker shows up and checks in saying he needs to take care of a few things and grab some stuff. So I check in his ID and flip a few lights for him, then go back about my business. Fast forward a few hours and my shift is about to end. I still haven't seen the guy come back. So I go patrol the building to find him and literally can't find him anywhere. He's not in any of the areas I turned lights on for him, no other lights are on, and he's not in any other rooms. I stop by security to see if we just missed each other and he's trying to leave, but nobody is there. I do a second patrol and still no signs. At this point I went to check cameras to see where he went, but he's not on a single camera except the one covering the entrance and security station. He turns down a hallway and never shows up on the next camera down said hall. At this point I logged it as an incident, and GTFO right as the relief shift showed up. Next day my boss calls me and says that worker had been on vacation out of state for several days, and wouldn't return for several more. Nobody could offer any explanation to what happened. My mom would show me the snow owl, the winter before she passed. She'd say, "Did you see the owl? Come see the owl." We're native, and some natives believe that the owl comes before death. I was called just before 11 a.m. The police captain called to tell me that they were taking my mom into the hospital. She collapsed on her porch and was in a coma. I called a friend to take me. We waited, my brothers and sisters and I, and when the doc came in he gave us the news. I listened to the prognosis, which was, if she came out of it, she'd be in a vegetative state. I felt like I just couldn't take any more, Everyone crying, all the chaos, and went downstairs to sit outside, process it all, I guess. Before I did that though, I kissed her on the forehead, and said it's okay if you got to go. My sister heard me, and said don't leave us. As I was sitting alone outside the hospital, the parking lot turned into a bright blue and white and I saw my mother running down a ramp. I looked to where she was running and saw a bunch of people in an orange aura type of thing. I couldn't tell who they were, but I knew they were her friends. She saw me and came running towards me, and said, "Give me a hug. I gotta go, I gotta go." I gave her a hug and said, "I know you do, Ma. I know you do." She ran towards the group, and then the vision was gone. The parking lot was back to normal. Right at that point, my friend came down and said, "You have to go upstairs, your mom's taking her last breath." I looked at her and said, "My mom's already gone." Maybe my brain just couldn't take the overload, and gave me a vision to handle the stress, I don't know. I had a habit of checking my watch, still do, and I noticed the time when I sat down. It was 1:10, when my friend came down, it was 1:20. Time noted on her death certificate 1:16 p.m. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.